I woke up from a mushroom cloud and found myself back 3 years before the end of the world. Last time, humanity lost. 300 million people fell back to the last line of defense. The 6th Air Division rammed the centipede monsters with helicopters. Tanks clogged the breach and burned into a wall of iron. Destroyers charged the black tide and were blown to pieces. I pressed the self-destruct button with my own hands. Not this time. I had just called out Old Wong's exercise plan, and he stared wide-eyed and shouted, "You peeked at my plan?" I didn't peek. I just died once. My name is Yunshu, 36 years old. I was originally the Red Force commander at the Hongyangping exercise base, running war games against that guy Old Wong. But that day I woke up from an incredibly long dream, my head stuffed with 12 years of the future. Old Wong patted my shoulder and said, "Old Li, you're not awake yet, are you?" My first reaction was, "You're still alive?" Outside the window was the familiar blue sky and yellow earth, not those damned 3 suns and purple sky. I pulled up Old Wong's sleeve to check his tactical watch. March 14th, 2XX9. 12 years ago. Old Wong, in your next exercise, are you going to use a tactical nuke to wipe out my 2nd regiment? You put the main forces in those positions, waiting for the nuclear bomb to go off before encircling me? Old Wong stared wide-eyed. How did you know? Did you peek at my plan? Okay, it's not a dream. I immediately requested a physical and psychological evaluation, then applied for a face-to-face interview with the general staff. Evaluation results: physically normal, psychological age above 60. During the interview, sitting across from me was Lu Hai, Deputy Director of the Military Affairs Department of the General Staff. I said I had a dream. The end of the world is coming soon. I could read the expression on his face, another one driven mad by training drills. I stood up and walked to the camera. Operation Migratory Bird, 5639-362, FDRB 42. Operation Jingwei, 5247494437, SDG 1. Please verify these 2 things for me. Also, at 8 p.m. tonight, there will be a 5.0 magnitude earthquake on the west coast of Japan, and at 1 a.m. a military aircraft will collide with a passenger plane. Lu Hai said, "We know. You rest assured and receive treatment." But I could see from the screen that his fingers were trembling. At 8:33 that evening, the earthquake struck Japan. The time was exact to the second. At 1 a.m., a military plane collided with a passenger airliner. 2 hours later, Chief of General Staff Ding appeared at the door of my hospital room. The old man's eyes were bloodshot, and he demanded outright, "How do you know those 2 code names? What about the apocalypse?" I said, "Reporting, Commander, I come from 12 years in the future. Humanity lost, utterly lost." I broke down everything I'd experienced in the next 12 years and told it to them. 3 hours later, the Chief of Staff slammed his teacup. "Damn it! What the hell is all this?" But the investigation results Lu Hai handed him silenced him, those 2 top-secret plan numbers. They had only taken shape in his mind last week, and he had never told anyone. The Chief of Staff brought me into the central compound. 7 elders sat in the small conference room and listened to me speak. The room so quiet that you could hear the clock hand ticking on the wall. The leading elder picked up his enamel mug, took a sip of chilled goji berry water, and said hoarsely, "Old Ding, do you believe it yourself?" Chief of Staff Ding was silent for a long time. Reporting, "I don't dare believe it. But I don't dare to bet against it either." Old Qian pushed up his glasses. "From a scientific point of view, this matter simply isn't scientific. All of humanity traveling through time? An alien invasion? This is even more absurd than a movie. But those predictions accurate to the minute are even more unscientific. So what's the conclusion? I don't dare believe it, but I don't dare not believe it." The old man at the head stood up, bracing his hands on the table, his gaze sweeping over everyone. "Now the question is, what do we do? What do we, the people of the Eastern nation, do? What do we humans do?" No one could answer on the spot. For the next 72 hours, the lights never went out in the Central Sea. I sat in the small room next door, surrounded by paper and pens, writing down every memory I could dredge up. For fountain pens ran dry, the pages densely covered with times, places, and numbers. The first group brought in was a team of staff officers who ran model simulations. I broke down the 9-year war into 3 phases and explained it to them. After listening, they went next door to crunch the numbers, then came back to ask me for more details. The clatter of keyboards from next door never stopped. On the 3rd night, the Chief of General Staff pushed the door open, holding a stack of printed paper, with bags as heavy as if 2 lead balls were hanging from them. "Li Yunshu, the General Staff has done a preliminary simulation. If your memories are all correct, we have at most a 4-year window. 4 years later, when the first batch of alien infiltrators come, The entire eastern nation coastline will be in dire peril. By the 7th year, 60% of the industrial zone had fallen. By the 9th year, we had retreated to the last line of defense. The Spark Joint Command in your dream, we calculated that it was around that time. I put down my pen. The window was shorter than I had thought. Much shorter. The Chief of Staff slapped the war game report in front of me. According to the normal mobilization process, from decision to execution would take at least 18 months. Interdepartmental coordination, public mobilization, industrial conversion, resource allocation, any single snag would cost 3 months. But what we needed to do was 10 times more complex than a normal mobilization. How much time would it take? The most optimistic estimate was 2.5 years. I lowered my head and calculated. That left a 9-month cushion. 9 months. The Chief of Staff stared at me. If anything went wrong along the way, everything would be lost. I thought of the burning helicopters in my dream, the tanks plugging the breach, the destroyers charging into the black tide, and the ordinary people who charged forward clutching gas canisters at the end. Chief, I said, in the dream, when we lost to the very end, I pressed the self-destruct button. As the mushroom cloud rose, I was thinking, if only I could do it over again, even one day earlier would be enough. But I'd come back more than 3 years ahead of schedule. The Chief of the General Staff looked at me and suddenly smiled. You died once in a dream, kid. Now you're not afraid of dying anymore, are you? I am, I said. But more than dying, I'm afraid of losing again. Good. He turned and walked out. Keep writing. I'll go meet with the old comrades. We need a plan before dawn. At 6 in the morning, I wrote the last line, and the pen finally ran dry. When I pushed open the door, the corridor was packed with people, some in military uniform, some in white lab coats, and a few I couldn't quite place. I only learned later that they were top experts in energy, industry, and agriculture, flown in by special plane before sunrise. Everyone had split into a dozen groups, meeting in different rooms. From the far end of the corridor, I heard someone shouting, "Evacuation priority has to be reworked. Industrial equipment and core technical data come first." Another voice shot straight back, "What about the people? 300 million of them, where are you evacuating them to?" Then we calculate. Give me 48 hours. The Chief of the General Staff stepped out of the main meeting room and waved me over. Come in. The main conference table was covered with a huge world map, already filled with arrows and markers. All 7 elders were present, and beside them were over a dozen new faces, all heads of various ministries. The leading elder handed me a cup of hot tea. We've all read your materials. Some still don't believe it. He paused. But you're right, we can't afford to gamble. So what we're discussing now is not whether to believe, but how to do it. I have one question. He stared at me. In those 12 years of memories, where did we go wrong? I had thought about this question countless times in my dreams. We wasted too much time integrating resources, I said. Each country fought on its own, intelligence wasn't shared, resources weren't coordinated. By the time we realized we had to unite, we'd already lost half the country. What else? Rebuilding the industrial system was delayed too long. In the other world, every supply chain had to be built from scratch, but we spent 3 years before really starting. Anything else? At the decision-making level, some people kept waiting for more evidence. Only when the aliens actually landed and people died did they make up their minds to fully mobilize. By then, the window had already closed. When I finished, the conference room fell silent for a moment. Elder Qian spoke first. So our core task is get things done before anyone else realizes it. Right, I said. If we wait until the public sees the aliens on the horizon before mobilizing, it'll be too late. So we mobilize ahead of time. The Chief of General Staff picked up the thread. Under what pretext? Military exercises? Natural disaster warnings? A dual cover. A middle-aged man in glasses said, joint military drills in the eastern seas, and a major geological disaster warning in the west. Pack all the resource allocation and population evacuation into that. The public will accept it. What about military-industrial capacity? How do we explain the sudden doubling of orders? Changes in the international situation. Another man in a suit chimed in. Find a pretext, say, an escalation in some region to trigger emergency production conversion in the defense industry. Plausible and reasonable. Listening to them construct an entire framework for a non-existent mobilization plan in 3 minutes, I felt a chill run down my spine. 12 years ago, what these people lacked wasn't intelligence, it was a certain knowledge of the coming disaster. Now that knowledge exists. The meeting lasted 2 full days. In the end, the strategic direction was set, 3 lines advancing simultaneously. First, intelligence and reconnaissance. Under the guise of deep space exploration programs and deep sea monitoring networks. We comprehensively upgraded satellites, radar, and sonar systems. In reality, this was to monitor the space-time rifts used by alien races to cross over 3 to 6 months before the rifts from my dreams appeared. There would be clear electromagnetic anomaly signals. Second, industry and energy. Under the banner of New Infrastructure 2.0, we launched a nationwide construction of underground fortifications and energy reserve systems. Key industrial equipment was fully backed up, and critical supply chains were pre-positioned deep in the inland mountains. I drew detailed maps of the otherworld for the general staff, and they are now coordinating with site selection teams. Third, population and education. This was the hardest part. With 300 million people, it was impossible to tell everyone the truth, but we had to complete their skill transformation without their awareness. The plan was a nationwide emergency preparedness initiative learning first aid, basic mechanical repair, and survival skills. The official rationale was to respond to the increasing frequency of natural disasters. Within 3 years, we had to make the entire national industrial system operational again in an unfamiliar environment. Qian Lao concluded, 10 times harder than landing on the moon. But it had to be done. The elder at the head of the group said. On the 7th day, I received the preliminary execution plan. Opening the first page, I saw a handwritten note from the Chief of General Staff. If this plan leaks, the consequences will be incalculable. The core decision-making circle is no more than 30 people. The second page is the migratory bird plan under the guise of a century-long geological disaster risk assessment, establishing an underground shelter network covering the entire country. Actually, it was the prototype of the future Spark plan. The third page is the Jingwei operation under the pretext of marine strategic resource exploration, forming a special task force, specially trained for combat and survival in otherworldly environments. I flip further. The fourth page is the industrial backup list. The fifth page is the energy reserve targets. The sixth page is the relocation plan for seed banks and gene banks. Flip to the last page, on which there is only one line of handwritten text. If all goes well, we have 3 years and 2 months. The signature is that of 7 elderly leaders. I close the plan, sit back in the chair, and let out a long breath. Someone knocks at the door. A young staff officer pokes his head in. Commander Lee, Chief Ding asked you to come over. I walk into the adjoining war room. The electronic map has already been updated with the first batch of site markers. The Chief of General Staff stands before the screen, turns his head to look at me. Where do we start? I walk up to the map, pick up a laser pointer, and point at a spot on the eastern coast. Here. Why here? In my dream, the first spatio-temporal rift appeared directly above this location. I move the laser pointer downward. At the same time, the natural rock formations 500 meters underground are suitable for the first storage depot. The survey report won't be submitted for another 3 months, but we can move ahead of schedule. The Chief of General Staff looked at me for 3 seconds, then told the staff officer, notify the engineering corps that preliminary reconnaissance must be completed within 72 hours. External code name, Project Dongfeng 0. The staff officer snapped to attention, saluted, turned, and ran out. The Chief of General Staff walked over to me and lowered his voice. Li Yunshu. Here. For the next 3 years, you will be coordinating with over a dozen departments every day. Factories, military units, research institutes, and local governments, you'll have to visit them all. The details in your dreams must become executable instructions. I understand. Also, he paused. Everyone in this room knows that if none of it happens in the end, meaning your memories are wrong, everything we've done these 3 years will go down in history as a gigantic joke. You may be held accountable to the very end. I know. Are you afraid? I fell silent for a moment. Flashing before my eyes were the burning helicopters, the destroyers charging into the black tide, and then the ordinary people rushing forward with gas canisters in their arms. And when that mushroom cloud went up, children's drawings drifted out of the transport trucks on them, wobbly words. Mommy, Daddy, I'll wait for you to come home. Scared, I said, but this time it's different. How so? This time, we have time. The Chief of the General Staff looked at me, reached out and patted my shoulder, then turned and left. I was alone in the operations room. Red dots packed the electronic map, each one representing a node to be built over the next 3 years. I counted more than 1,700. 3 years, 1,700 points. Behind each point are hundreds upon hundreds of people who have no idea what they're doing. Yet one day they will become the sparks of human civilization. I walked to the window. Outside, soldiers were running formation drills on the base parade ground. Their chants penetrated the glass, carrying that raw, vigorous energy unique to early morning. Blue sky, yellow earth, A group of people who still believe tomorrow will be better. The children from my dreams, they shouldn't have to live through that again. I walked back to the desk and opened the first page of the execution plan. I picked up a pen and wrote a line in the blank space. Every step counts. After writing, I closed the notebook and went out to find the engineering corps officer in charge. In the corridor, a young man with the rank of major ran over. Commander Lee, the advanced team of Dongfeng Zero has assembled and awaits your orders. I followed him outside. As we passed the main conference room, the door was ajar. I heard the 7 elders inside still in meeting. The one at the head spoke softly but clearly. Old comrades, whether these old bones of ours can safely carry 300 million people across that threshold depends on these 3 years. Meeting adjourned, back to work. Footsteps sounded, the door was pushed open. Sunlight streamed in from the end of the corridor, stretching everyone's shadows long. I stood at the boundary between light and shadow. The last thing flashing through my mind was the moment 12 years later when I pressed the self-destruct button. Then I stepped into the sunlight. That night, I dreamed of the command post again. On the sand table, only one red zone remained, surrounded on all sides. The helicopters of the 6th Air Division burned and fell in the purple mist. Tanks blocked the gap and turned into a steel wall. The destroyer charged into the black tide and shattered, while the charge bugle sounded from the north. But this time, it was different. This time I saw countless red lines on the sand table, densely packed supply lines, fortification lines, and evacuation routes, filling the whole picture to the brim. At the end of the red lines, transport trucks were passing through the fissure, and children's drawings floated out of the trucks, carrying the same message. The image froze at the instant I pressed the self-destruct button. Before the mushroom cloud rose, I heard a voice. Lee Yunshu, are you awake? I'm awake. Outside the window, it was still dark night. The base was silent, with only the lights of distant sentry posts flickering. I sat up, switched on the bedside lamp, opened the execution plan to the first page, and beneath the words, every step counts, I added another line. 3 years from now, I want to see a different ending. I closed the notebook and turned off the light. In the darkness, I stared at the ceiling, hearing my steady heartbeat. Dawn was almost here. A new day, starting from the first note. Later, someone asked me what was the hardest part about those 3 years. After thinking it over, the hardest part wasn't building fortifications, wasn't allocating resources, wasn't dealing with interdepartmental squabbles. The hardest part is having to confirm to yourself every time you open your eyes those memories are real, those sacrifices are real, and you have to make decisions for them while no one else knows. But whenever I can't hold on, I think of that mushroom cloud rising and the children's drawings drifting out of the transport vehicle. Mom and Dad, I'm waiting for you to come home. This time, it's not just children waiting for you to come home. It's all of human civilization. Looking back now, when I sat in the small conference room beside the Central Sea and wrote the last page of my notes, from the next room came the clear voice of the leading elder. Now the question is, what should we do? What should we Easterners do? What should we humans do? I didn't answer at the time, but now I know the answer. Keep going, every step counts. See you in 3 years. Lee Yunshu, who had been waiting anxiously outside, finally received a reply. He entered the small conference room once again. Now, immediately, tell us everything you know, especially anything that can still be verified soon, so we can conduct further verification. Chief of Staff Ding took the lead, pulling Lee Yunshu aside. His calloused palm instinctively gripped Lee Yunshu's wrist, knuckles whitening from the force. The battle-hardened general's eyes were rimmed red, and his whole body was trembling slightly. In a while, come with me to the Academy of Sciences. We need to perform the most comprehensive scan of your mind to verify your claims. Elder Qian also walked over, adjusted his glasses, and looked seriously at Lee Yunshu. Don't worry, it's just a scan of your brainwaves. It won't cause you any harm. Elder Qian added seriously. Lee Yunshu smiled and immediately agreed. Hell, as long as it could verify his claims, he wouldn't care even if they sliced him open, let alone simply scan his brainwaves. At that moment, another elder walked up to him, Elder Zhu, who was in charge of the Eastern nation's civil affairs. In a while, describe everything you know about the other world, and all the details of that crossing. I'll have Zhejiang 3 build a large data model and run simulations and verifications to develop the most thorough response strategy as soon as possible. 9 Chapters 3 is the most powerful supercomputer in the Eastern nation, with the strongest computing power in the world. No problem, Lee Yunshu replied. Good. The leading old man, who was also the current head of the Eastern nation, spoke. Time is short. I can give you at most 3 days. Within these 3 days, complete all verification and then tell me the answer. 3 days later, if the verification succeeds, then Lee Yunshu, The fate of the hundreds of millions of people of the Eastern Nation will be entrusted to you. Now move out." Without a single word of nonsense, everyone immediately began their tasks. Li Yunshu, together with Old Qian, under layers of protection, went directly to the Central Academy of Sciences. A state-of-the-art laboratory was already prepared. Old Qian led Li Yunshu to a machine in the middle of the lab and pointed at a helmet placed nearby that looked extremely sci-fi. "Put on this helmet and then try your best to recall everything you experienced in that world. This is the brain-computer interface newly developed by the Eastern Nation. It can quantify your brainwaves." Li Yunshu hurriedly put on the helmet and sat down on the nearby machine. Old Qian nodded at him, then walked over and turned on the machine. As a rumble sounded, Li Yunshu felt no discomfort at all. "Apart from the helmet being a bit heavy, my scalp felt a little warm. All right, now recall everything you experienced in the other world. The more detailed, the better." Old Qian's voice came through the helmet. Li Yunshu closed his eyes and began to recall those memories he wanted to forget, yet dared not forget, and even more impossible to forget, the smiles and resolve of his comrades as they charged forward one after another. The roars of the alien race, retreating again and again, until there was no way left, the final hope, those scattered pieces of paper, and he didn't know how long had passed. Suddenly, he felt a chill on his head. It turned out Old Qian had come over and lifted off the helmet. While he was still dazed, Old Qian handed him a tissue. "Wipe your face," Old Qian said softly, then turned around to check the results. It was only then Li Yunshu realized that, without noticing, he had long been crying, tears streaming down his face. After wiping his tears with a few strokes, Li Yunshu hurried to Old Qian's side. Old Qian was staring intently at a report before him, his brows furrowing deeper and deeper as he looked. The report looked somewhat like an ordinary ECG monitor reading. It's just that the amplitude isn't that large, only a thick black line fluctuates slightly up and down. You know? Old Qian's voice was especially hoarse at this moment. Depending on the hippocampus, memories in dreams and memories in reality are completely different, and no one can change that. Memories in dreams mostly lack details and cannot be coherent. So in brain waves, they mostly appear as individual dots, at most as some intermittent short lines. But you Old Qian tapped the report in his hand. This is definitely not a dream. On the other side, Chief of Staff Ding brought a document provided by Li Yunshu to the Intelligence Center, which listed the major events that Li Yunshu knew and still remembered, events that were about to happen or had already happened recently. A coup was about to take place in Country Fei. The rebels would seize the presidential palace and establish a new regime. A volcano on Cold Island, silent for hundreds of years, would erupt 3 days later, and volcanic ash would cover half of Cold Island. A businessman of Eastern descent in Country Xia named K would sell several transportation hubs in his hands to the Eagle Nation in the near future, a move that would have a huge impact on Eastern Nation. The Eagle Nation would release a classified document. It recorded scandals of many officials, but the publicly disclosed portions of the file were all redacted, rendering it meaningless. One by one, Old Ding had people verify each piece of information. Even things that hadn't happened yet began to be investigated, and then the results were passed back to Old Ding one by one. All correct, without exception. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Li Yunshu stepped into this room of less than 30 square meters for the third time. The small meeting room was now filled with a grave atmosphere, and everyone, with bloodshot eyes, was earnestly flipping through the thick documents at hand. At the top of the documents was a line of bold text. After multiple verifications, the probability that the future Li Yunshu described is real is 96.35%. If the situation is true and we do not respond as soon as possible, given current developments, the probability of the worst outcome is 99.9%. There was no longer any doubt. The central leader waved the documents in his hand, producing a rustling sound. "I propose that, effective immediately, we establish the Eastern Nation's Special Emergency Response Command. I will serve as the Commander-in-Chief. All of you will be members of the command group, and Li Yunshu will serve as Deputy Commander-in-Chief and Special Advisor. Does anyone have any objections?" "No." Everyone nodded solemnly. "Very well. I will immediately sign Order Number 1. From today, the Eastern Nation enters first-level combat readiness." "Central, isn't this too hasty? With such suddenness, I'm worried there might be problems among the people." Old Zhu hesitated. "Trust our people, they'll be fine." The Central's tone was extremely resolute. "Comrades, we don't have much time left. There are only 82 days before the crossing begins. We must not become sinners of the Eastern Nation. The safety of hundreds of millions of Eastern Nation citizens hangs on this single moment. Soon, On all Eastern people's phones, on the internet, on televisions, on the big screens and squares, on every terminal capable of receiving information. A message that shocked the entire nation appeared. The entire Eastern nation, starting at 12 hours 33 minutes and 21 seconds Huajing time, declares itself in a state of first-level combat readiness. The whole country was stunned. At 1:05 a.m. by Eagle Nation time, in the White Pentagonal residence, Commander-in-Chief Jonard had just fallen into the deepest sleep of the day when he was awakened by a burst of urgent alarm bells. The Secret Service agent didn't even have time to knock before Jonard flung off the velvet silk quilt, pressing his hand over his heart that had nearly jumped out, cold sweat pouring from his whole body. "Mr. President, we have an emergency. The Secretary of Defense is waiting for you in room 3. The Chief of Staff, his face pale, burst into the bedroom. He, who was always immaculate, was wearing a wrinkled suit, but he had no time to care about that. The encrypted phone to the Oval Office was vibrating incessantly on the bedside table, and the warning light flashed with a red glow that only made his irritation worse. Jonard took a deep breath and struggled out of bed. Damn it, what the hell is going on? Did those guys get surrounded by the neighboring oil barons again and come crying for help? Or did another plane go down? Could the country on the other side of the planet have pulled some new stunt again? What sort of contraption is flying this time? Last time it was a ginkgo leaf, is it a chopstick this time? Jonard grumbled while pulling on his clothes. I told you, do not disturb my sleep unless it's truly important. He sat on the edge of the bed, giving his Chief of Staff a cold stare. Speak. What's going on? Chief of Staff Tress visibly swallowed and answered in a trembling voice. That country, the country across from us, has announced a nationwide first-level combat readiness status. What did you say? President Jonard jumped up from his bed. Room 3. By now it was already total pandemonium. Countless screens were flashing non-stop, phones were ringing off the hook, and the Secretary of Defense and senior military officials were running around the room like headless chickens. Jonard hurried to the center of the room. What the hell is going on? I hope this isn't an early April Fool's joke. Secretary of Defense Hansen strode up to him and handed him a stack of documents. The Eastern State, at 12 hours 33 minutes and 31 seconds Hanjing time, broadcast the announcement of entering nationwide first-level combat readiness across all media and communication platforms. And it's been playing on a loop ever since. After our verification, this is no drill and no joke, they're serious. Hansen pressed a switch in his hand, and a screen materialized before them. On the screen was Mac, the director of the War Intelligence Bureau. At this moment, Mac looked utterly frazzled, tearing at his collar and shouting something at the subordinates around him. It seemed he only noticed Hansen's contact and turned around to face the screen. Boss, the situation is extremely bad. He pulled a projection to his side. The ocean satellite cloud map was covered with dense red triangle markers, each blinking that represented a vessel of the Eastern nation that had just broken radio silence. All warships from the 3 major fleets of the Eastern nation had gone off silent mode and were currently assembling at their maritime boundary line. He pointed at the projection, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed. What's going on? Are those Easterners preparing to fight an unprecedented naval battle with someone? Jonard muttered. No, worse than that. Carter, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, also squeezed in. 20 minutes ago, our keyhole satellites caught a large number of land-based missile silos in the Eastern nation collectively filling with water. The electronic sand table behind him suddenly burst into glaring red light. 27 Air Force bases along the Eastern nation's southeastern coast simultaneously switched to combat status. Have the Easterners gone mad? What are they going to do? Jonathan blurted out. I don't know. Hansen shook his head. Currently, apart from activating war readiness, the Eastern nation's official side hasn't given any other explanation. However, they did initiate an emergency meeting request at the League of Nations, scheduled for this afternoon. Carter, you immediately lead the team to the League of Nations headquarters to attend the afternoon meeting. We must figure out what the Eastern nation people really want to do. Hansen, order the 3 armed forces to enter first-level combat readiness. We must be prepared. Mr. President, this will have a major impact. The Blue Party will certainly take the opportunity to attack you, Hansen said, spreading his hands. It doesn't matter, let them attack. This is something that must be done. Jonathan waved his hand, then slowly sat down on a chair beside him. Damn it, I hope those Eastern nation people are really crazy. Otherwise, I'm afraid big trouble is coming. He slumped in the chair, muttering to himself. At the same time, on Ing Island, a variety show unique to the island was proceeding cheerfully. Dear audience, welcome to Ing Island Views. The host waved a glow stick in an exaggerated manner. Today we are honored to have Professor Hashimoto and Professor Nagata to discuss the latest developments on the other side that everyone is so concerned about. Professor Hashimoto, we all know that the Eastern nation's military has grown a lot in recent years. What are your thoughts on that? The host pointed the microphone toward the stage with a flamboyant tone. My thoughts. Professor Hashimoto made a contemptuous expression. That's just a pile of scrap metal. The real estate market over there collapsed and foreign capital ran away. Forget tea eggs, they'll soon be unable to even afford rice. To barely prop things up, they built a bunch of garbage. Didn't people already discover the aircraft carrier deck cracked and the submarine sunk at Yuanjiang port? Professor Hashimoto adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses, his sleek slicked back hair glinting under the spotlight. Those broken ships of theirs are missiles can precisely hit their kitchen from 30 kilometers away. The audience burst into barbell-like laughter. Ha ha ha. The audience and host plunged into a fit of wild laughter. Let me tell you, Hashimoto. The other guest, Professor Nagata, spoke up. Although the Eastern state is indeed nothing to fear, it's still unrealistic to think a single missile could sink their aircraft carrier. It would take at least 3 or more. Just as he was rambling on in full flow, Professor Nagata's phone seemed to receive a message. Aha, it's from my assistant. Probably some good news. Let me take a look. Professor Nagata waved his hand and picked up his phone. Suddenly he stared at it, his pupils violently constricting, his face as pale as paper, his fingers trembling as if electrocuted. My dog is about to give birth. I have to get back right away. This scholar who claimed to be a master of strategic bluffing actually treated the audience to a race-walking performance, even leaving behind his crocodile skin briefcase, supposedly worth 100,000, on the seat. What the hell is Nagata doing? What's so urgent? Seeing the one who had been standing on stage with him suddenly run off, Professor Hashimoto looked deeply displeased. He still had plenty of grand theories to unleash. And without his stage partner, the effect would suffer considerably. A dog giving birth? As I recall, his dog is male. Don't tell me his old wife is having a late life surprise. Professor Hashimoto revealed a sleazy smile. And at that moment, the phone beside him rang. He casually grabbed it and held it up to his eyes. Then, everyone, no, sorry, my dog is about to give birth too. I'll be right back. Without even bothering to take the coat hanging on the back of his chair, Professor Hashimoto also rushed out, leaving only the host and the audience in the studio staring at each other in bewilderment. One after another, electronic alert tones began to sound throughout the studio. The political and business celebrities in the audience simultaneously received the same message. When Professor Hashimoto's Ferrari and Professor Nagata's Porsche staged a real-life Initial D on the airport bridge, the international airport was already packed with celebrities carrying Hermes luggage, their panicked looks just like ants whose nest had been overturned. The same scene was replaying in every corner of the world. In Neon, Minghan, Monkey Island, and Haidian, under the dumbfounded stares of the public, local big shots scrambled one after another onto outbound flights, leaving behind ordinary people who had absolutely no idea what was happening. Until people discovered a shocking piece of news on Eastern Nation's social media. Eastern Nation announces nationwide Level 1 combat readiness. Nearly an hour had passed since Eastern Nation declared nationwide Level 1 combat readiness. At first, ripples spread across society, but soon Eastern Nation was enveloped in a peculiar atmosphere. It was a unique state where calm and fervor interwove. The entire society remained orderly, with no signs of unrest whatsoever, yet a stirring emotion was quietly fermenting in people's hearts, burning hotter and hotter. In every city, armed forces offices and military compound gates saw long lines forming. These were reservists and veterans. For now, only those who had received the news first or lived nearby had arrived. As time went on, that number would only grow. Remember, Eastern Nation had over 50 million veterans and reservists, and countless more people would rush to enlist at the nation's call. Their hearts burned with anxiety, and their steps were hurried as they rushed toward the nearest military registration point, afraid that even a step too late would mean losing the chance to serve their country. Online, it was a truly lively scene. Top-level combat readiness. What is our motherland trying to do? Did aliens really attack? Why do you care what our motherland is doing? I'm just asking, are you excited or not? Excited. How could I not be? I'm so fired up I'm about to explode. You don't know? Our school has quite a few exchange students from Kimchi country. Every single one of them was so arrogant and cocky all day. As soon as this news came out, the look on their faces was absolutely priceless. Now they're even more submissive than before, just short of kneeling down and singing Conquer. What's the use of just getting excited? I'm already nearly at the military registration office. Retired third-term NCO, almost back at the barracks. Hey, the one above, you still haven't made it? Take your time waiting in line. I'm telling you, I'm almost at the front. Same third-term retired NCO. I envy you guys. Why does this time only need retired veterans and reservists? National defense students also want to serve. You little brats, it's not your turn yet. You're still wet behind the ears. We wouldn't feel safe leaving it to you. A 10-year veteran is already on the high-speed train to the barracks. Hey, have you guys noticed? In the past, whenever our mom made a move, the monkeys in neon over there would protest all over the place. Why are they as quiet as mutes this time? Why? Do you even need to ask? Because our mom is playing for real this time. Would they dare run their mouths anymore? Even though the first-level combat readiness definitely isn't for these few stinking bugs. But the shockwave alone can grind them to dust without any problem. Haven't you heard? These countries don't even dare to tell their people about our mom's big move. But they themselves got out of the way fast enough. If you don't believe me, go check their international flights. It'll definitely give you a shock. Man, any flight that can get you abroad is completely sold out, even business class. And these ticket prices, are you serious? They're more than 10 times the normal price. Haha, the people of the UK are raising a huge fuss. They say from the Prime Minister to every major minister, everyone has gone missing, and right now the Prime Minister's position is just an empty shell. Some people are even posting their own experiences online. Someone actually took a photo of the completely empty UK Prime Minister's residence. God knows how they managed to get that shot. These photos were like a stone cast into a lake, stirring 1,000 ripples. Soon, more people shared their own finds, and all kinds of spectacular photos surfaced, making the entire internet even more lively. Meanwhile, everything that happened online was sorted, categorized, and compiled for the command center. So far, everything was normal public sentiment, and order were far better than expected. The central leadership was right, as expected. Old Ju looked at the situation analysis before him and couldn't help but nod. How could anything go wrong? Chief of Staff Ding grinned. When have we Easterners ever been ambiguous on matters of principle? Old Ju didn't refute him. How could he not know the sincerity and sense of responsibility of the Eastern people? But as the highest official in charge of civil affairs, he had to consider the worst-case scenario first. Currently, public sentiment was stable and order was completely under control. All grassroots workers had canceled their leaves, remaining at their posts in their respective jurisdictions, closely monitoring all developments. According to the predictions of the Zhejiang 3 model, within at least 72 hours, there would be no major fluctuations. Old Ding, don't just focus on my side. How are things on your end? Old Ju looked at Chief of Staff Ding beside him. My side? When have I ever let you down? Do you have some misunderstanding about our soldiers? At present, the entire military has entered the highest state of combat readiness, and reservists and veterans across the country are speeding back to their units. At the current pace, within 3 days at the latest, we will have over 50 million troops. Once those 3 days pass, we can proceed to the next phase. Old Ju remarked with a sigh. The next phase is the real crux. Indeed, Chief of Staff Ding sighed as well. Everything so far has been within the contingency plan. The next phase is the true test. Old Ju, do you think we can hold on? Can we guarantee that order won't collapse and that normal production and living conditions can be maintained? Once that so-called transmigration begins, the impact on people's hearts and minds will be absolutely terrifying. Old Ju's expression turned extremely grave. Yes, according to Yunshu, once the transmigration time arrives, there will be no warning whatsoever. All of humanity will be transmigrated in random batches over the course of 3 years. No one knows when their turn will come. Each day, 1,000th of the total human population will transmigrate. It could very well be you who goes next. Moreover, during transmigration, a person may bring one supply item along, as long as that item has only ever been touched by that person alone. Under such circumstances, maintaining social stability would be extremely difficult. People's fears and instincts would be amplified to the limit. According to Yunshu, last time it took just 1 week for the entire world to descend into endless chaos. Even the Eastern nation barely managed to maintain a minimal order. If I were to judge by what I've learned in this lifetime about psychology and sociology, I would say it's impossible. No country or collective could maintain order under those conditions. Riots and looting would be all but inevitable. But Old Ju shifted his tone, just as the central leadership said. I choose to believe in our people. Besides, this time we have him, don't we? If we can prepare in advance, we can surely bring about a different result. As he spoke, Old Ju looked toward the other side of the command center, where Yunshu was hunched over, writing furiously, racing against time to record everything he knew. From time to time, a special agent would walk up to him, carefully placed the finished pages into a storage case, and then rushed them out as fast as possible. At this moment, Yunshu was filled with regret. For the first time, he hated that his mind wasn't sharp enough. The last 3 years in the other world, those hellish experiences had drained all his energy now. Many crucial matters had become blurred in his memory. Gritting his teeth, he squeezed every last brain cell, knowing full well that recalling one more thing, remembering one more detail, might save countless lives and add to the Eastern nation's odds of victory. On the table before him, manuscripts were piled like a mountain, densely covered with intelligence from the other world, along with every detail of the crossing he had tried his utmost to recall. Shaoli, it's almost time. Chief of Staff Ding walked over softly, his voice gentle and tinged with concern, and reached out to pat Yunshu's shoulder. Yunshu took a deep breath, nodded slowly, and with deft movements gathered the papers one by one, clutching them tightly to his chest. Then he let out a heavy breath, as if to steady himself. Steadying his nerves, he strode out of the command center. Inside the great hall of the people, the noise and excitement were at a fever pitch. The top scholars from the entire Eastern nation, the Academy of Sciences, the Academy of Social Sciences, and the Academy of Agricultural Sciences. Senior officers from the 3 branches of the armed forces were almost all gathered here. Old Qian, what on earth is going on? First, an emergency meeting is called, and then the country issues first-level combat readiness. Old Du from the Aerospace Center, his face full of anxiety, hurried to Old Qian's side with his brows knitted into a tight frown, his tone full of worry and confusion. Indeed, there was no warning at all. And suddenly such a big move. Several key projects I'm handling have been forced to an emergency stop. Old Lu, the chief engineer of Yanfei, also came over, saying as he did so, while shaking his head helplessly, his face written with incomprehension. I do know the details, but I can't tell you yet. Old Qian remarked with a solemn expression, and gave a slight shake of his head. However, it won't be long before you all learn the truth. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gathered you here. Just as he was speaking, a soldier with an upright bearing, carrying a thick stack of documents, strode vigorously onto the platform and went straight to sit among Old Qian, Old Zhu, and the others. Whether it was an illusion or not, people even saw in him an overwhelming fighting spirit, mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The sharp killing intent seemed to drop the temperature of the entire venue by several degrees. In that instant, the entire hall fell silent. All eyes snapped onto the soldier, and the venue was so quiet that a pin drop could be heard. Everyone held their breath, awaiting the major announcement about to be made. This soldier was none other than Yunshu. Without the slightest hesitation, he neither introduced himself nor bothered with any formalities. And with crisp, decisive movements, he turned on the massive central projection screen. The moment the text on the screen appeared, First Emergency Meeting of the Eastern States Special Situation Response Command Center. The audience instantly erupted. Gasps and murmurs rose one after another. But soon, everyone forced down their inner shock and gradually fell quiet, all holding their breath, waiting for what came next. Yunshu paused briefly, slowly sweeping his gaze across every person in the hall. Only when the venue was completely silent did he speak in a clear voice. What I'm about to say, many of you will likely find hard to believe at first, but I beg everyone to hear me out patiently. If you have any questions, please wait until I finish speaking. His voice was low and powerful, carrying an undeniable authority. The moment he finished speaking, he projected the materials he had prepared one by one. For a moment, the entire venue fell into an eerie silence. The expressions on everyone's faces varied. Some were full of confusion, brows furrowed, some wore disdainful looks, corners of their mouths curling up, others were so excited their faces flushed red, hands unconsciously clenched. But from beginning to end, no one interrupted aloud. It wasn't until Yunshu finished projecting and explaining the last piece of material that the audience completely erupted. Nearly everyone eagerly raised their hands high, their faces full of urgency, with too many questions in their hearts demanding answers. Nationwide transmigration? Survival in another world? A commander who traveled back from a post-apocalyptic future? No matter how you heard it, it sounded like a fantasy. Are you sure this isn't a joke? Everyone, please be quiet. Old Master Zhu stood up, clapping his hands forcefully, and shouted loudly, trying to suppress the chaotic scene. His voice was hoarse, yet full of strength. I first assure everyone that all of this is true, it's no joke. Right. Qian Lao also stood up, bracing his hands on the table, leaning forward slightly with a solemn expression. I can vouch for that too, we have repeatedly confirmed this through every possible channel. With these two respected and influential elders of the Eastern nation stepping forward to vouch for the matter, no one doubted its truth any longer. Yet what followed were even more and deeper questions. May I ask, when exactly will the transmigration begin? A distinguished academic stood up and asked with a concerned look. There are still 81 days, 9 hours, and 37 minutes until the first batch begins. That is, exactly midnight on June 15th, 2XX9, Yunshu answered immediately. Why is this transmigration happening? The same academic frowned slightly, his face full of bewilderment. We don't know. We suspect the intervention of a higher civilization, but there is no solid evidence to confirm it yet. Yunshu shook his head helplessly. Can the transmigration be stopped? Or can it be controlled? Another person asked urgently. No. At least so far, there is no way at all. Yunshu said in a heavy tone, giving a disappointing answer. Why do we lose? A major general stood up, his voice loud and clear, carrying the crisp decisiveness unique to a soldier. Because last time, we were completely unprepared. Yunshu's voice was full of regret. Last time, the transmigration struck without any warning. At first, nobody believed it. And by the time everyone finally confirmed it was real, the social order in most countries had already collapsed. During the 3-year transmigration period, in the early stages in the other world, we simply couldn't rally together. Why? The major general pressed. Because the transmigration was utterly random, the order was random, and the destinations were random too. In the beginning, in the other world, we had no means of communication, so naturally there was no way to muster our forces. In the first year, the mortality rate among those who crossed over exceeded 80%. It wasn't until the second year that we barely managed to gain a foothold in the other world and set up a few small strongholds. Only by the third year did we establish a nation in the other world and begin restoring technology and production. But no sooner had those 3 years passed than 4 different forces suddenly emerged in the other world. And they all attacked humanity at once. All of humanity fought desperately. Yet in the 12th year, our final line of defense was breached, and humanity was driven to extinction. Yunshu's voice trembled slightly as he spoke, his eyes filled with pain and unwillingness. You are all elites, the pillars of every industry. Today, this emergency meeting has been convened, precisely to pool our wisdom and make thorough preparations with the time we have left. Yunshu's gaze was resolute, sweeping across the room, and he declared loudly, this time, we absolutely must not lose again. Today, everyone present is a trusted comrade and a member of the Special Situations Response Command. You will be divided according to your fields into 5 sections: military, environment, production, daily life, and logistics, and based on the available information, you will do your utmost to prepare for the upcoming transmigration. Please formulate the most perfect contingency plan for our Eastern Kingdom and for its hundreds of millions of people. 5 hours had already passed since the Eastern Kingdom issued its first-level combat readiness. Yunshu remained in the Great Hall, engaged in heated discussions with the others, while on the other side, an even larger-scale meeting had also begun. The main hall of the World League headquarters. This time, the number of participants exceeded the historical maximum. Almost every country had sent a special envoy. Every delegate was talking with representatives from allied nations, especially those from Kimchi and Monkey Island, who looked as if they wished they could glue themselves onto the Eagle's representative. As the scheduled time arrived, Zhao Li, the Eastern nation's ambassador to the World League, hurried up onto the podium. Everyone's gaze gathered on him. Zhao Li cleared his throat and said in a clear voice, first of all, on behalf of the Eastern nation's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I welcome representatives of all countries to this emergency session of the World League Assembly initiated by our country. I believe every delegate here now has one most pressing question: why our country suddenly activated first-level combat readiness. Here I can give you all an accurate answer on behalf of the Eastern nation. This time, our country's first-level combat readiness is not aimed at any country. A commotion instantly broke out below the stage. One could even see the representatives from Monkey Island, Kimchi, and Japan let out a visible sigh of relief. But at that moment, Ambassador Zhao shifted his tone. Although we said it is not aimed at any country, but there is a prerequisite for this matter. What our country is about to do next must not be interfered with or sabotaged by any nation. Otherwise, our country will certainly go all out to deliver the maximum blow. As soon as the words fell, the faces of the representatives from Japan and South Korea visibly turned pale, and the representative from Taiwan even began to tremble. Ambassador Zhao looked with satisfaction at the reactions of the delegates below the stage. He shook his head slightly with a hint of regret. Some of you may have made guesses, But I have to tell you, you guessed wrong. Although I personally really do have some wish to realize your guesses. But this time it truly isn't that. The Eastern nation will not launch any proactive attacks, nor will it target any country or region. Then what exactly are you going to do? Carter, the American representative, simply couldn't hold it in anymore. You've amassed so many troops, could it be you simply want to show off your military might to all the countries? Impossible, the cost would be too great. You say you won't target any country or region. Are you trying to fight aliens? Correct. Ambassador Zhao said with a serious expression, but not entirely right. The entire audience was stunned. Including Carter, everyone stared at Ambassador Zhao with their mouths hanging open. Our country has received confirmed intelligence that at midnight on June 15th, 2XX9, humanity will experience an unprecedented crisis. The reason we initiated first-level combat readiness is precisely to counter this greatest crisis in human history. Guided by the principle of a community with a shared future for mankind, we convened this emergency meeting to notify all nations to prepare for the upcoming crisis. The audience immediately erupted, and the entire venue was thrown into chaos. The representatives of all countries stared at Ambassador Zhao in disbelief, unable to accept that he would say such a thing. Impossible. There had been no warning whatsoever. Have the Easterners gone mad? How dare they use such an excuse? What crisis? If anything, the source of the crisis is your Eastern country. Would the Easterners be this benevolent? If a crisis were truly coming, and you knew about it in advance, would you really tell us? Don't tell me you have some other agenda. Zhao Li looked at the chaotic scene below the stage and could not help recalling the top-secret communication he had received not long ago. You mean, 3 months from now, all mankind will face an unprecedented crisis, and that is why our country activated first-level combat readiness? Zhao Li looked at the command center on the internal video feed with a face full of confusion, his eyes filled with disbelief. The command center nodded grimly, confirming it. Your task is to inform all nations of this news at today's special UN session. Why? Zhao Li couldn't help blurting out, his emotions somewhat agitated. Since we got the information in advance, why tell them? Those guys absolutely won't thank us for it, and they might even push their luck. The more he spoke, the more agitated he became, his hands waving involuntarily. The command center smiled, his tone calm and firm, so that they won't drag everyone down with them in despair. And to secure a righteous cause we can claim on the world stage. I neither overestimate their ceiling nor underestimate their floor. He paused slightly, as if thinking about how to explain further. 3 months is too short, so short that no matter what we do in that time, we cannot achieve it without alerting other countries, especially Eagle Country. In that case, we might as well tell them from the start, so they can be somewhat prepared and won't be driven to desperation and madness. Besides, this way our country can hold the moral high ground. If the thing really does happen, then we can use this righteous cause to do a great deal. But what if it doesn't happen as predicted? Zhao Li was anxious, and fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. It's fine domestically, we can just treat it as a show of strength. But those foreign guys will definitely make a big deal out of this. Public opinion has been in their hands anyway. When the time comes, Zhao Li was interrupted before he could finish by the central. When the time comes, we old-timers just need to resign and take the responsibility. A trace of determination emerged in the central's eyes. Even if we are nailed to the pillar of shame forever, compared to the possible apocalypse and the lives of hundreds of millions of people of the Eastern nation that might be sacrificed, this price is too light. Quiet. Zhao Li snapped back from his memories. He slapped the table forcefully. The sound echoed through the hall, gradually quieting the chaotic hall. Our notification has been fully delivered. Next, we will hold a closed-door meeting of the 5 permanent members. Please have all delegates inform their heads of state that our Central Command will conduct direct remote talks with you. The end of the world is coming. Is this impending fate or a fantasy of the Eastern Kingdom? The Eastern Kingdom's top brass had a sudden whim. Is this a lack of humanity or a distortion of morality? The most absurd news of the year. The end of the world is coming, the Eastern Kingdom, the Mayans of the new era. With the conclusion of the International Council meeting, global media outlets were filled with ridicule and sarcasm toward the Eastern Kingdom, especially after it announced that its first-level combat readiness would not target any country or region. In an instant, the Eastern Kingdom became the biggest clown on the internet, the most famous joke of the year. Overwhelming mockery swept in, and those Western media outlets that were already accustomed to fanning the flames were like sharks that had smelled blood, furiously attacking the Eastern Kingdom. In their writings, the Eastern Kingdom's solemnly proclaimed Doomsday warning became a laughable farce. The Eastern Kingdom says the end of the world is coming? Haha. Then should we pack our bags tomorrow and get ready to board Noah's Ark? A senior commentator from a well-known Eagle Country media outlet appeared on a primetime program with a faint sneer at the corner of his mouth, holding forth at the camera. His exaggerated tone was like that of someone relating a preposterous tale cooked up by a kindergartner. Who do they think they are? God's chosen messengers? If you ask me, this is nothing more than a cheap ploy by the Eastern Kingdom to gain some presence on the international stage. His voice spread through the airwaves into every street and household, prompting countless viewers to laugh along. The Pickle Country media were not to be outdone either. A newspaper with a considerable circulation ran a front-page article with a headline blaring, "The Eastern Kingdom's Doomsday Farce. Should we laugh or cry?" The article spared no effort in its mockery. The Eastern Kingdom has truly opened the world's eyes this time. What a pity their imagination isn't being put to use writing science fiction novels. As for this talk about the end of the world, could it be they've watched too many Hollywood disaster movies and want to get into character themselves? Our great Korea is nothing like certain countries. They were immersed in such unrealistic fantasies all day, claiming, "We focus on development. We focus on improving our people's quality of life." Yet between the lines, it was nothing but contempt and arrogance toward the Eastern country. On the internet in Japan, a wave of parody swept through, with all kinds of memes and jokes centered on the doomsday of the Eastern country, spreading wildly. Someone even made a funny video, which edited together clips of the Eastern country's representatives speaking at the UN General Assembly with exaggerated expressions of various cartoon characters, set to cheerful and comical music. Within just a few hours, the views exceeded 1 million. The comments section below the video was filled with appalling mockery and abuse. Those vicious words were like daggers stabbing at the Eastern country. On international social media platforms, the hashtag Eastern Country Doomsday jokes quickly climbed to the top of the trending charts. Netizens from around the world flocked to the topic to leave comments, freely venting their so-called sense of humor. Until the Eastern country dropped a second shocking piece of news. The Eastern country announced that, from this day forward, it would cease all export operations and would no longer supply any goods to other countries. All goods and merchandise that have been sent but not yet delivered will also be recalled. This caused a massive uproar. People from all countries who were still boasting online, especially those living on the other side of the planet, discovered overnight that the shelves were empty. People no longer had time for online grandstanding. Instead, they dashed madly toward the nearest supermarket. The usually orderly stores now looked like battlefields ravaged by a storm. In front of the shelves, frenzied crowds packed together. With reddened eyes, people shoved one another, desperate to grab even a single pack of toilet paper. What happened? Yesterday, the shelves were fully stocked. Today, they were completely empty. A middle-aged woman from Eagle Country screamed, staring at the empty shelves of daily necessities, her shopping basket hanging limply from her hand. The people around her turned a deaf ear to her cries. They continued to dart madly between the shelves, trying to find any overlooked items. In Kimchi Country, the situation was equally bad. The once bustling convenience stores were now deserted. Only a few scattered goods remained on the shelves. Wasn't that Eastern country supposed to be joking? How come even instant noodles are sold out now? A young man pounded the counter furiously and roared at the shop assistant. The clerk shrugged helplessly. "It's been out of stock since yesterday. I heard the Eastern country has halted all exports, and no one knows when they'll resume." The young man stamped his feet in frustration, recalling how he had mocked the Eastern country online before. Now he was desperately struggling to buy basic necessities. The people of Mudhan were also thrown into panic. Automotive production lines had to be shut down due to a shortage of key components from the Eastern country, and electronics companies were running out of stock. Those netizens who had once loved making parody meme packs about the Eastern country now had no heart for online revelry and instead flocked to social media to complain about their daily inconveniences. Without parts from the Eastern country, our electronic products simply can't be made. What are we going to do? A boss of an electronics company posted a tearful lament online, and a flood of replies followed, all filled with public anxiety and fear. Yet these panicked people had no idea. Even if the Eastern Kingdom had halted all trade, goods wouldn't have disappeared this quickly. The reason they couldn't buy anything was that someone else had gotten there first. Right after the Eastern Kingdom issued its Doomsday Declaration, the ultra-wealthy of these countries keenly sensed both opportunity and crisis. They sprang into action immediately, frantically stockpiling every kind of supply. On one hand, they used their resources and influence to have people stir up trouble online, drawing the public's attention and focusing everyone's attention on mocking the Eastern Kingdom. On the other hand, They secretly directed their subordinates to sweep up every resource they could get their hands on at any cost. Vast quantities of goods, from daily necessities to rare metals, from high-tech products to precious medicines, were continuously loaded into these tycoons' private doomsday shelters and secret warehouses. These shelters were built deep in the mountains, or hidden on islands, equipped with state-of-the-art defense and survival facilities, creating isolated safe fortresses for the wealthy. This was the root cause of the material shortages. Not only that, but they also used various media outlets on the internet to twist the facts, directing the blame at the Eastern nation and firmly pinning the cause of the material shortages on it. They manipulated public opinion, leaving the uninformed masses even more angry and panicked, further intensifying social chaos. Meanwhile, they hid behind the scenes, watching coldly and secretly gloating. It was at this very moment that the Eastern nation issued its third bombshell announcement. The Eastern nation declares that, in order to confront the impending apocalypse, it now welcomes all compatriots from around the world to return home and fight the apocalypse together. We will arrange chartered flights in various countries to pick you up. This passage will remain open for 1 week, and no extensions will be granted. At the same time, for friends of all nationalities currently within the Eastern nation's borders, we will provide you with a fast-track route to leave our country. Furthermore, to ensure the situation remains stable and controllable, we will implement a certain degree of control measures. If you believe this affects your freedom, or feel you cannot adapt to this environment, then regardless of whether you are a citizen of the Eastern nation or not, you are also free to leave. We'll also provide you with a fast track. Those willing to return welcome. Those who want to leave, we won't stop you. Eastern Country, H City, Versailles Palace Lakeside Garden Community. Under the dappled light of the crystal chandelier, William Wong was cramming a knockoff Hermes scarf into an LV suitcase. The crocodile strap watch on his wrist had a plasticky sheen. In the midst of his packing, he suddenly kicked over the television that was still broadcasting the news. What a dump. Even the air reeks of servility. This damn country. I can't stand another day here. Whoever wants to go mad in this place can stay. I'm out of here. Wong Defa, are you really leaving? The country is at a critical moment, and you're leaving now. Seeing William Wong cramming bags big and small into the car trunk, the neighbor old Zhang couldn't help but speak up. If you leave now, it'll be very hard to come back again. Come back? Why would I come back? William Wong rolled his eyes. To come back and go mad with you all? This sick country. This is not my country. My country is over there, that land full of freedom and hope. William Wong made a hugging gesture toward the west. Wong Defa you. Old Zhang wanted to persuade him further. Shut up. William spun around. His pupils behind his gold-rimmed glasses shrank to pinpricks. Don't call me Wong Defa. I am William Wong. Old Zhang's lips moved, as if he wanted to say something more, but he was pulled back by the person beside him. Let him go. This guy has never been one of us. Old Zhang could only sigh helplessly, his eyes full of disappointment. And so, Wong Defa drove all the way to Changhai International Airport. I can finally leave this place and go to that dream country. A young man dressed in brand-name sportswear shouted excitedly, waving the plane ticket in his hand. I heard the water and even the air there are sweet. A woman with big wavy hair chimed in shrilly, her face full of longing. My family already bought a big house in Eagle Country. You fools can stay in this godforsaken place. I'm going to go live the good life. A middle-aged man with a beer belly beamed with pride, boasting loudly. The reason I've never been able to make something of myself is all because of this ossified country. Once I get there, within 3 years, I'm sure to become somebody. A young man in a peaked cap declared confidently. Obviously, everyone here was much the same as Wang Defa. They were all bananas. At one side of the airport, Zhang Meng, a SWAT officer in charge of maintaining order, stood beside the boarding gate in his black SWAT uniform. At this moment, with a stern face, he coldly watched those jubilant guys, his eyes full of contempt and bewilderment. His hand unconsciously tightened around the baton at his waist, knuckles turning white from the grip. He simply couldn't understand what these people were thinking to leave the Eastern country at such a critical moment. Those who had never considered themselves Easterners in the first place were one thing, but those who still fantasize about making it big abroad are simply ridiculous. If you can't accomplish anything in a place you know like the back of your hand, what makes you think you can rise to prominence and shock the world in a place that's completely foreign and full of discrimination? Stop dwelling on it, Mengzi. The captain had somehow appeared beside him, patting his shoulder and handing him a peppermint candy. Let them go. There'll be plenty of time for them to regret it later. Didn't the instructor say that banana people like them are ticking time bombs if they stay in the country? The captain narrowed his eyes slightly, watching the endless stream of flights taking off from the tarmac. A cold smile curled at the corner of his mouth. We don't fear any external enemy, but the deadliest knives always come from within. The same scene was playing out all across the eastern country. Countless airports and customs checkpoints were operating at full capacity, sending countless William Wongs out of the country. Meanwhile, in other countries around the world, things were completely different. Having just finished his doctoral thesis defense, Deng Chong didn't even bother to collect his degree certificate. He hastily threw a few clothes into a slightly worn backpack, slung it over his shoulders. He hurried toward the airport. Deng, are you really leaving? At the gate of the Imperial Institute of Technology, an elegantly dressed old man blocked his path. Professor Smith's face was full of seriousness, his eyes revealing regret. You are my most brilliant student. Only by staying can you achieve greater academic heights. As he spoke, he reached out and gently grasped Deng Chong's arm. Your country is going mad. If you go back, you'll be drawn into that frenzied whirlpool and ground to pieces. No. Deng Chong slowly shook his head. I don't think my country is going mad. He raised his chin slightly, his tone carrying undeniable pride. Professor Smith, you don't understand us Easterners. We would never joke about something so important. This is the moment our motherland needs us most. Even if I can only contribute the slightest bit, I must go back. If you go back like this, you won't earn your doctorate. Professor Smith's tone turned stern, his brows knitted even tighter, and the muscles in his face twitched slightly. It doesn't matter. Deng Chong let out a light laugh, his face full of carefree indifference. A degree is nothing compared to my motherland. Are you really not going to reconsider? Professor Smith was silent for a moment, then asked again, a hint of final hope in his eyes. No, Deng Chong answered resolutely, and then prepared to walk past the professor. Then I can only say I'm sorry. Professor Smith's face instantly turned ferocious. Almost at the same moment, a black SUV rushed over from the other side of the school gate like a beast, and screeched to a halt in front of Deng Chong. Several fully armed men in black quickly jumped out and surrounded Deng Chong. Easterner, we suspect you of spying on our country's secrets. You're under arrest. The leading man in black viciously threw a piece of paper into Deng Chong's face, the paper grazing his cheek and leaving a faint red mark. Similarly, the UK, France, and Germany all reacted in unison, apprehending those Easterners who wanted to return home. They all had one thing in common. They were the most outstanding students from their respective schools. At the same time, there were also many ordinary people, the wandering sons and daughters of the Eastern nation living abroad. Among them were students pursuing their studies, merchants doing business, workers employed abroad, and ordinary travelers on holiday. All of them, without exception, had set out on the journey back to the Eastern nation, because they all still remembered that they were citizens of the Eastern nation. 3 days had passed in the blink of an eye since the Eastern nation issued the announcement. Chief Zhu, these are the data urgently collected from customs and airports over the past few days. Secretary General Li Chong stepped forward quickly and, with both hands, respectfully handed a document stamped with a red confidential seal to Chief Zhu. Chief Zhu took the document, his eyes swiftly scanning over it. Outbound population, for million. Among them, nearly 2 million are Eastern nation citizens. He shook his head slightly, frowned, and said with a note of puzzlement, that's far fewer than I estimated. What about those who entered illegally and those who are purely tourists? Were they all included? Li Chong quickly nodded. Every foreign national currently in the country has been counted, not one missed. It's just that there are quite a number of undocumented residents, people with no identity records at all. We are racing against time to conduct further screening. Zhu Lao paced back and forth in the command post with his hands behind his back. After a moment's thought, he said in a deep voice, the screening must be sped up. It has to be completed within 2 days. If we really can't find the person, restrict access to the specific area. Even if we have to dig 3 feet into the ground, we must find him. Yes, Li Chong responded crisply, then paused. He then asked tentatively, as for the 2 million Easterners who left the country? Zhu Lao waved his hand impatiently, cutting him off. Those are irrelevant. If they're gone, it saves us the trouble. Li Chong said no more and quickly switched topics. Over the past few days, more than 3 million people have returned to the Eastern Kingdom from all over the world. Most are Eastern citizens, and a small number are Eastern nationals. This is good. As long as they are willing to return, we welcome all of them. Zhu Lao's expression softened, warmth in his voice. Notify all departments to make preparations for receiving them. We must never let our returned compatriots feel disheartened. Of course, the screening and prevention work must not be relaxed in the slightest. Understood. Li Chong quickly took notes, then reported, "There is one more situation." Many returned overseas students reported that their excellent friends had been detained. In addition, many also reported that key talents such as chief engineers, consultants, and developers were also detained and could not return to the eastern country. I am already aware of this situation. A sardonic expression immediately appeared on Old Zhu's face. He snorted coldly and said, "Those guys. They just repeat the same few tricks. Nothing new at all. Don't worry, we will certainly resolve this properly." At the same moment, in the special small meeting room in the International League Hall, a fierce confrontation was unfolding at the second closed-door remote video conference, with the atmosphere bristling with tension. "Your actions have seriously violated the free trade agreement." President Jonald of Eagle Country, his face flushed red and his eyes wide with anger, pounded the table. "Restore exports of goods immediately and compensate us for the losses caused by the delay. Otherwise, we will immediately take countermeasures." The leaders of the rotten country, Hans, Iris, and other countries chimed in one after another, filling the meeting room with clamor. Only the supreme leader of the Red Star Federation remained silent. He leaned back in his chair with an air of detachment. After all, the Eastern Nation's central leadership had long ago reached a secret agreement with him. Not only would the Eastern Nation not stop exporting goods to the Red Star Federation, but it would also bypass Eagle Dollar settlement, directly trading resources exported by the Red Star Federation for industrial goods, and at a very favorable price. Free trade? The Eastern Nation's central leadership gave a contemptuous chuckle, his tone full of derision. "Don't you find it ironic to hear those words from the Grand Commander's mouth? Everyone knows full well who it is that truly disregards free trade. Let's bring this tedious farce to an early close. If you're happy to keep playing it, then go right ahead. I don't mind being a spectator." Jonard and the others, upon hearing this, fell silent at once, all eyes turning sharply toward the Eastern Nation's central leadership, their looks filled with probing intent. "Exactly how much do you know about that crisis? Judging from your actions, you surely know more than you've revealed." Jonard's face was grim, his voice low. "Our side is still verifying. What about yours? Have the verification results come out yet?" The leader of the Eastern Nation curled the corner of his mouth with a trace of sarcasm. At the last closed-door meeting, the leader of the Eastern Nation had already informed the various countries of the impending natural disaster information summarized by Yunshu. Afterward, those predictions were confirmed one by one. Jonard and the others' faces instantly turned extremely ugly. "Indeed, it is exactly as you predicted. But relying solely on this, it is not enough to confirm the authenticity of the crisis. We need more information. The Eastern Nation had better disclose all intelligence without reservation. Rest assured, our Eastern Nation is not like certain countries that cover things up. We will definitely make it public." However, the expression of the Eastern Nation's leader turned serious. "You must first satisfy our conditions." "What conditions?" the Prime Minister of the Iris Nation asked in confusion. "Release the scholars and people from all walks of life of our country who have been detained over the past 2 days, and ensure they return safely to the Eastern Nation. Once they set foot on Eastern soil, we will naturally share more detailed information." "That's impossible," Jonard blurted out without thinking. "Is that so?" The Eastern Nation's leader smiled instead of getting angry, sweeping his gaze across the crowd. "Then don't blame me for not warning you. Maybe in a couple of days, something will fall from the sky and hit some important building." As he spoke, he looked at the head of state of the Iris Nation. "Or perhaps, the people in some place will have been pushed past their limits." He took revenge on the conglomerate tycoons, successfully making them vanish. His gaze then turned to the grand leader of the Eagle family. He even considered unleashing a massive tsunami to sweep away every member of a certain family.